Hello and welcome to the Rocktographer. Okay, first, absolutely welcome to my channel and my first video. This is going to be dedicated to photography with the subtle twist that everything I shoot deals with geologic phenomena. So I'll give you a brief introduction. My name is Ken. I did a degree in New York in geology, and I've been working in the industry of environmental consulting and related activities for the past 10 years. All throughout that time, I've had this photography hobby, and it's been a great way to meet and network with people. So here I am running this feed, and long story short, bing bang boom, my first video deals with Box Canyon, which, let's zoom out here. We are in California. We are in Southern California. We are near the Salton Sea, a flooded portion of the Salton Trough, which is this enormous valley, Imperial Valley, which runs right along the flank of the San Andreas Fault. Everything we're going to look at in this video deals with features that are in very close association with the San Andreas Fault. And we're going to look around, walk around. We're going to go up this road here, Box Canyon Road, and we're going to make several stops where I decided to set up and shoot some pictures. And we're going to discuss at the sub 101 level what we are effectively looking at. In a nutshell, the San Andreas Fault is this red stripe that is warping all the drainage channels through the area. We're going to stop here first and take a look at it, and then we're going to go up the canyon and check out everything else. Now, I'm running this towards the goal of convincing you that photography is two things. To me, it's two things. Number one, it is an art. Number two, it is the presentation of data. So you can nerd out with a camera just the same way you can nerd out with a book or any other topic that you've picked up. And what I intend to do is highlight, as I said early on in this presentation, we are going to try and present geologic phenomena in the form of photography and perhaps blend those two instances. Now this is not going to be high production. I do not work for the Discovery Channel. I'm just a paisano from New York, out here in the western southwest states, and just having some fun, messing around and networking. So here we go. Box Canyon Road comes up, cuts through the Mecca Hills. This is the topic area for today. It's this sort of meandering, incised, meandering drainage channel that connects the Salton Trough with the high desert up here. In context, here's Interstate 10 running through here. So if you're traveling from the east, from Arizona, it's a short detour to get through here and see some pretty cool stuff. So let's jump into it. Welcome once again. Okay, we are right on the flank at the mouth of Box Canyon. Is it the mouth where it drains out? Or is it, no, it's not the head, it's the mouth.
The entrance to the canyon.
The entrance to Box Canyon on Box Canyon Road, Mecca Hills, California. And we are on the flank of the San Andreas Fault, which is distinguished by different colors of fault gouge. So if you look over here, the color change in the rocks right here is fault gouge, material that's been ground up by movement on the San Andreas Fault. More importantly, what we're focusing on today is the action along the sides of the fault. So what we're going to do is we're going to go up Box Canyon. We're going to look at examples of deformation, transpressive folding, the rock units that are exposed, which one of the reasons I love coming here is because it's easy. You're only dealing with one formation broken into two members. It's the Palm Spring Formation, and it consists of an upper and lower member. And these contacts between them are controlled by either unconformities, faulting, or nothing else. Unconformities and faulting. So, even though we're here on the San Andreas Fault, and we're going to look at how it separates the two formations. Yeah.
Question.
Okay, and what we're looking at here more specifically for this stop is the interaction between two major faults. Over here, you've got the Skeleton Canyon Fault, which is a thrust reverse fault paralleling the San Andreas for several miles. And you can see its influence on the strata over there. Everything's been turned up. In some cases, been turned up vertical. There's several parallel thrust faults you can see up there. And then there's the San Andreas itself, which just wreaks havoc all through this area. So what we're going to do is we're going to stop and look at the rocks over that side of the fault, North American plate, and look at the rocks on that side of the fault, Pacific plate.
And let's get a shot of the Salton Sea.
Now we're standing over the Salton Trough. San Andreas Fault marks the eastern boundary of the Salton Trough. Down there, we're below sea level by about 160 feet, and it's a typical rift valley. It is actively subsiding right now. There's power plants that tap into heat produced by magma, and we're close to and on part of the youngest part of the San. So the theme of the day is going to be uplift along the San Andreas Fault. The first thing to provide as evidence for that are these. These are blocks of metamorphic rocks which belong to the Orocopia schist, which is located a few miles away. And we're on a hill standing over these drainage gullies and fluvial areas, and if this stuff rolled downhill with streams and flash floods and everything else that this area is subjected to, how did it get to sit on the high ground? Well, it's actually evidence of recent uplift along the San Andreas Fault, which is right there. So if you look at this guy, this is a block of the Orocopia schist. You can see the banding in it, you can see the differentiation, leucosomes. This guy was transported pretty far. Okay, I'm standing on here, the Lower Palm Springs Formation, which is a delta plain, floodplain, meandering river channel deposit of Orocopia sandstone. And you can see the layering in it. It's a bit jointed. It's been beaten up by the action of the San Andreas Fault. And there's some really cool weathering profiles here that I'm going to shoot. So, this is the Lower Palm Springs Formation. I'm going to edit that out. Alright, I'll leave it in. Why not? So basically, as the Salton Sea, or the Salton Trough, began to subside, it diverted the course of all the major rivers in what is now the high desert of California. So the Colorado River, anything else that flowed downstream through this area turned and altered course to get to the Salton Trough and dump all of its load out. So what you have are fine laminar sandstones, rounded to sub-rounded, subangular gravels, and rippled sandstones. And all of this came barreling down the river to empty into the Salton Trough. Once again, this is a Pliocene through Pleistocene, 5 million years ago to about 1 million years ago, deposit of Orocopia sandstone along meandering, fluvial, braided river channels. So one thing I just noticed here is the prehistoric ball pit. We've got all this Orocopia sandstone up at the top, and you can see those void spaces, those weathered cavities, which I'm about to get a picture of. And then on the slope, you have all of these rounded, cemented sandstone wads. This looks like concretions to me. It looks like concretions are weathering out of that hill and tumbling down the side of the mountain. Just a pretty cool feature, pretty cool observation. Okay, and this is the Upper Palm Spring Formation, and the first thing you'll notice is that it weathers a little differently. It's very poorly consolidated. and it has a lot more gravel in it. This represents a period of uplift, erosion, and subsidence, and a change in the source of the material that comprises this unit. We're going to look at some cool features here. The San Andreas Fault is right around the bend there, right where that tree is. The San Andreas Fault separates the lower and the upper Palm Spring unit. And as a result of uplift, erosion, and subsidence, we had a change in the direction of streams. We have interspersed fluvial deposits. You can see the cross bedding and you can see the ripples. And you have what resembles sort of alluvial fan deposits. So we have higher velocity stream action, and we have a different source of material. We're no longer in the Colorado riverbed. We're in something much more local. And that makes sense because you have more gravels, you have a larger grain size, which indicates both stream velocity and being more proximal to the source. As the San Andreas Fault was developing, several periods of uplift and subsidence occurred on the flanks of it. Some of these events were spaced out over thousands of years, a couple million years, but long story short, the fault developed peculiar geometric variances and developed restraining bends in it, which wreaked havoc on anything sitting next to it. Now we can look at some pretty cool features, some secondary action that has occurred in this unit. There's a lot of faulting. It looks like we have some kind of graben. It looks like we have some sort of additional faulting happening here. Spectacular. So you have these laminar fluvial channels. You have some ripple and crossbed and really poorly consolidated stuff. Remember, this is only about 1 million years old at best. And you have these gravel deposits thrown down on top of them, and then they're folded apart, churned together, and it's all happening right along the San Andreas Fault. We're going to go to our next stop. Okay, we are back in the lower Palm Spring member, and I'm going to show you something pretty cool. This is an excellent example of thickening. So what's happening here is that we are on the flank of the Skeleton Canyon Fault. It's a thrust fault. And now what's happening here is that the bedding planes themselves are acting like faults. You've got this sandstone and you've got this mudstone. Now, as you know, mudstone deforms much more fluidly and easily compared to sandstone. So basically what's happening is, as this material is shearing this way, the mudstone is acting sort of as a lubricant. It's actually flowing like paste, allowing these blocks of sandstone to stack up and slide over one another, thereby taking the thickness of one layer and multiplying it by 2, thickening. So we're on the flank of the Skeleton Canyon Fault, and give me a second, I'll show you it. So here we are. I'm standing more or less directly in line with the Skeleton Canyon Fault. You've got a resistant block of the Lower Palm Spring, and then you have this, which is the Skeleton Canyon Fault. It doesn't look like much, but when you consider that this pile of dirt is the result of mechanical grinding, reducing blocks of sandstone to just a fine powder fault gouge, I'm pretty sure you will find it impressive. So we're taking a closer look at that fault gouge. Here it is. And there it is, juxtaposed against the Lower Palm Spring. There's that sheared sandstone and mudstone, and then there is nothing but fault gouge. Now when you consider this stuff was once solid rock, but is now, it's a bad example, this is pretty tight, just powder. Now we've stepped back away from it again. So you've got Lower Palm Spring, fault gouge, fault gouge, fault gouge, fault gouge, and then Lower Palm Spring again. And there's a marked difference in the strata there. That is much more horizontal. It's intensely sheared, but it's managed to stay somewhat sideways. And then over here, these guys have been turned up. So this is a thrust fault. Motion is that way. Skeleton Canyon Fault, exposed in Box Canyon. Alright, this here is the contact, a non-faulted contact between the Lower Palm Spring member and the Upper Palm Spring member. But first things first, I don't make the rules. I break as many rules as I can, but I don't create them. So if the sun's going to be right over my outcrop, washing out my scene, there's really nothing much I can do about that. Nonetheless, here you can see these layers of sandstone and mudstone are terminating against the more massive and more gravelly layers of the Upper Palm Springs formation. And what this corresponds to is, first, a period of uplift along the San Andreas Fault, and uplift and erosion. So this material was warped up, started to get stripped away, and then subsidence resumed. And when subsidence resumed and material was able to flow back into the direction of the Salton Trough, it got buried by the upper Palm Spring Formation. Now, a lot of it at the base of the upper looks a lot like reworked lower formation. So you've got this fine-grained arkose. You still have layers of mudstone, and you have lenses of gravel. But as you move up into that section, you move into more of a alluvial fan type setting. And so what this represents, distal streams, the former Colorado riverbed, meandering streams, and then you have alluvial fan deposits covering that, which correspond to whatever was uplifted and able to be transported down onto the top of it. So we're going to go and we're going to look closer and try to get away from the blaring sun. Alright, so we're back into more favorable light conditions, and here's the angular unconformity. You see that these beds terminate against that massive sandstone layer. So you've got these river sediments, alternating sandstones, mudstones, and they terminate against these bigger, more massive deposits. Since the entire area has been warped several times over, it's prudent to show you where this typifies as a angular unconformity. So you have the top of this bed comes up and it terminates against that massive gravelly sandstone. So that's exactly the point where the material began to erode away, and then as subsidence resumed, the rest of it just came down on top of it. So what we're going to look at is some typical features of the lower Palm Spring. It really boils down to fast water or slow water. Now, when you're at the when you're on a delta plane, the streams meander. They change shape, they wind back and forth, and they do different things. So you've got this area here which is climbing ripples, smaller channel carvings. I mean, really small. Look at the size of that. And you can work your way up. You get into an extended period of a little bit faster water. This is a muddy sandstone. You can definitely see some cross bedding, some ripple action. We're going to move over, and you can see that the water slowed down, deposited muds, silts, fine sands, speeded up again, slowed down again. And this is a pretty normal feature. You've got rip-up clasts. Fragments of what was laid down got ripped up by sudden surges of water, tumbled around, landed back in the muds. And this goes on until we get into the upper Palm Spring Formation. Okay, so we're back across the contact, the angular unconformity, and we're going to show you how this correlates to the upper Palm Spring unit. Now this was the detritus of a local uplift. It's got more local material, more proximal. We're closer to the source of the material. This stuff hasn't transported very far, and that is evidenced by you've got some angular, you have some sub-rounded stuff, sub-angular stuff, some pretty angular stuff, but you've got a bunch of mixed material that came barreling down hillsides during storm surges. And so the upper is more of a mixed bag. You still have your fluvial action, you have your stream channels, you have some local cross-bedding, you have some mudstone deposits, but what really gives it away is the size of the cobbles that are entrained in this sandstone conglomerate mess. So the upper continues on from here. The unconformity is exposed in that hill as well, but we're not too concerned about it. We've got everything we need right here. So now I'm going to take some pictures. I'm going to try and make a panorama to show these two units. The challenges are obviously the position of the sun. So let's see what I come up with. Okay, so what we're going to do here is just look at some of the immensity of the deformation that has occurred. We are less than a mile from the San Andreas Fault, but we're well within its regime of transpressional folding, faulting, mayhem. So we have a lot of different things going on. Let's look at it. Cue theme music from the movie The Core. So there's a faulted contact between the upper Palm Spring and the lower Palm Spring occurring right there. And it's easy to spot because the upper is completely warped. It's completely vertical. There's a lot of overturned faults in there. You've got an anticline-syncline pair right here. And it smooths out over here, but continues to deform in that direction. Over here you have the painted canyon fault juxtaposing the vertical upper Palm Spring formation against the horizontal lower. It's a profound change. Obviously it was deformed in different locations and brought together by strike slip action. We can get a few pictures of that. And this is where the deformation excitement seems to end in Box Canyon. We've got these vertical layers of the upper Palm Spring formation consisting of alternating, really friable mudstones and shales capped by sandstones, conglomeratic stuff, varying degrees of particle size, from cobble to pebble. And right here is where it was turned up and warped and folded along the transpressional regime of the San Andreas Fault. We're about 1.5 miles away from the San Andreas Fault right now, and it seems to be the extent of the deformation system. Okay, and according to the USGS, this is part of the Hidden Springs Fault Zone. Once again, we are still in the upper, working our way north through Box Canyon. And you've got these layers of what I would describe as fanglomerate, alluvial fan deposits, offset by right lateral faulting. One side of the fault has eroded away completely, and you can see how during flash floods this area rages like a raging river, undercuts the cliff face, and then large blocks of it fall off. Once again, I apologize for the Southern California December sunlight. Here's a neat trick to determine if you're looking at a left or a right lateral fault. Obviously, in a right lateral fault, this block moves to the right. It leaves these scratches called slicken lines, and they tend to step down away from the direction that they are moving. So it's kind of like, as it slides, it rips off pieces of it. Once again, right lateral fault, the Hidden Springs Fault. Source is USGS. Here's a more contextual view. You can see the fault runs all the way up to the top of the outcrop, and one side of it is just exposed. And for our final stop, we're at the northernmost edge of Box Canyon. The entrance to the canyon is right there, and we're looking at a nonconformity. The lower unit consists of metasedimentary deposits of the Orocopia schist, inferred to have been dragged into the subducting Farallon plate, late Cretaceous, early Tertiary, mid-Tertiary, and then there was a significant period of erosion in the upper Palm Spring Formation. The fanglomerates, the alluvial fan deposits, the mixed stream channel deposits ended up on top of it. But this begs some more questions. Was the lower here before and it got eroded away completely? Or does this just plain mark at the time the edge of the Salton Trough, where the sedimentation filled to the high point on the edge of the subsiding Salton Trough? Perhaps the deposition reached a terminus before uplift started resuming again. Uplift is occurring right now, a few millimeters per year. And over here it seems that you have a
angular nonconformity, vertical foliated schist against horizontal fan deposits. Really cool stuff. See if I can get a closer look at the features of this schist.
He needs a good scale. Why not a broken bottle to show off this really neat fold in the Orocopia schist? Let's take a closer look at the Orocopia schist. It's got a really philitic texture. There's plenty of mica. These are sediments that got dragged into the subducting Farallon plate and were subject to all the tortures within it. This is part of the accretionary wedge of the subduction zone that carried the North American continent westward, went on through the mid-tertiary period, Miocene period of the tertiary, excuse me. Some kind of contact here. Very complicated geometry to it. That could be a fault that was occurring while these sediments were undergoing change. This basically, to me, looks like a sandy mud that got scraped and squished. A lot of terrific texture here. A lot of ductile shearing.
Geology. Classic.
A lot of disarticulation of layers. Leucosomes of quartz horizons.
A lot of folding and shearing.
And here's the shot. Well, let's go look at all the pictures I've taken on the way up and start editing.